Hey, welcome to the Duke of Work podcast. Today we're talking to Mike Brevik. Mike calls himself the Chief Barketing Officer of Cyberdogz. He's the founder of Cyberdogz, a non-traditional branding agency, and he has a heart for helping individuals and companies reach their next level in regards to their goals. And as a result, he is as passionate as a dog with a bone when it comes to true collaboration with his clients. He's also in the ultimate pursuit of projects that fill the creative cup and his dedication to teach the world about marketing through his podcast, Brand Retro. Mike is on a mission to lead with creativity and optimism, and Cyberdogz is on a mission to provide the pragmatic guidance, visibility, and intentional marketing support and direction to grow and reinvigorate businesses of all sizes in all categories. Mike, thanks for being on, man.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me.
Mike, every single time we have a conversation, I feel like, dang, this should be recorded. This is so much value. So I'm really looking forward to today's pod.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun.
I think to start really, I know we usually start with like hard, like tough questions or direct questions, but I honestly love a phrase that you just mentioned. And I want to start here because this kind of goes against the grain. It's not contrarian per se, but it definitely goes hard against the grain of traditional mindset for business owners. And what you said was you don't chase the sales goal, you don't chase the sales number, you don't chase just the revenue. Those are important, of course. It's like oxygen. The business needs it to live. But you chase something greater than that. And I want to dive into that. So, what are you aiming for? Why do you aim for that? And how does that inspire the work that you do?
For one, I think it keeps us on our toes. And to answer the question so people know what I'm talking about is that as an agency, we do not chase sales. I do not sell according to project. I don't really try to sell anything or really sell the things that I do. I more
Mm,
so build relationships with customers. Spend time with them. I get to know their business. And through that, I learn what their pain points are. And then as an agency, as a marketing solutions creative agency, then we talk about how do we make those pain points go away? How do we fix
mhm.
those problems? How do we streamline things?
Yeah.
And because of that approach, the customers, the money, it all just takes care of itself. So we pursue that relationship and really the happiness of our customers.
I think that's an interesting point, and I want to call it out because there's two paradigms, I would say. Like literally before this call, I was talking to a gentleman who specializes specifically on helping businesses exit and helping businesses grow to a certain valuation, and that mindset is very specific on certain sales cycle, amount, revenue, grow, cash flow, acquisition or exit or merger, strategic. That's great. I love that world. It's really fun, and that's part of the game. But also, there's a different game that we can play if we want to put that sports analogy. And I think that this approach, and I think it's a choice, it's a lifestyle choice. And to say that one is better than the other is incoherently wrong because like you can play the game and still win. And it doesn't have to be according to someone else's paradigm. So that I want to call that out and just highlight that this approach to me resonates really well because in my opinion, personally, when you're approaching this, it helps with quality. It helps with deep relationships. We can talk about your how long clients stay around and how much you've actually helped, but I kind of want to get it from your filter and your perspective because you're able to focus more on relationship, dive deeper in quality, actually solve the true core issues, root causes, not just surface level solutions that you can sell and et cetera, et cetera. How does that influence the types of work that you take on and the types of projects that you pursue?
For us, it's a mix. We have a soft spot to help clients and help clients in need. And sometimes we just want to help people out. If it's the right kind of client, right kind of situation, I just want to help them out. So let's do what we can. Let's bring our resources to the table and help these guys out. And then there's times where selfishly, I think this would be really fun. I just,
Mhm.
let's do something fun. Let's tackle a project because it fills our cup. And sometimes it's that. And then other times it feels routine because we've done these before. We've built websites before. We've done projects like this before. It feels like a natural fit. So we have different buckets of what could be considered an ideal client or an ideal project.
Mhm.
And it could be any one of those things, but at its core, we try to maintain our approach, which is branding matters, creative matters. Like we
Mhm.
have to have this visual presence so that the work that we do has the impact of a home run. And we want the work to look as though they had experts doing it. Client retention and client happiness matters to us.
Mhm.
So with that, sometimes it's simply solving the pain points or the problems the client has. And sometimes it's stepping in and saying, I know you don't know you need this, but you need this. And I'm not trying
Mm.
to upsell you, but here's the complete picture of what you really need. And sometimes that's the first time they've heard that, or it's
Mm.
the first time they've had somebody in their corner that's looking out. So a lot of different scenarios and a lot of different examples that kind of come to mind with that. But we really have a sit back and let's understand the customer before we start throwing solutions out there. So like when I've been asked before, could Cyberdogz ever use a salesman or could they ever use somebody out there knocking on doors? I don't think so
Mhm.
because we're not selling. The client tells us what the need is or where the direction is, and then we use our expertise to help them get there.
It's pretty interesting, and you're still experiencing growth. So I want to like highlight that for the audience that like Mike, you've been growing even since after the 2020 wave and continuous years. Thankfully, too busy that it's a blur. I want to highlight that again that your approach is working. It has to be working because you're experiencing this level of growth. So I want to kind of also like balance that mindset. And if you can give like examples, but dive into keeping with the reality that businesses run with profit and growth and reinvestment, that you need to make those sales, but then also balancing your approach to be diagnosis first, best for the customer first, but then
Mhm.
not like burdening with the sales. I want to get like into that.
Yeah. In my experience, typically what would happen is you would set your sales goal for the year. You might have a target number, a goal you're shooting for. Then you're basically looking forward, right? So week to week, month to month, you're trying to do whatever you can to nudge yourself closer to that end goal. And then quarterly, maybe at the mid-year mark, you're saying, God, am I on pace to hit that goal? Am I not on pace? It's a very forward thinking process. Not that my mind doesn't go there sometimes, because it does.
Makes sense.
I understand numbers matter, but we basically look backwards and that's how we figure out our goals. So since I started the company, I've kept records month over month and I know where my peaks and valleys are. I know where my patterns are. And I
Mhm.
know that if I keep doing what I'm doing, the law of averages tells me that I'm going to be up 20% this month and I'm going to be up. I can
Oh, wow.
estimate, I can kind of guesstimate historically where we're going to be. And because we've been doing it for this long and the pattern holds pretty consistent, all I got to do is stick to the plan. Just keep doing what you're doing. The numbers will take care of themselves. And then from that, what I do is I sit down monthly, sometimes quarterly, and I just validate whether or not the pattern's holding. Is it
Interesting.
changing? Is it different? And it's typically pretty consistent. The only difference I would say that kind of makes an impact on the year over year pattern is whether or not maybe we've taken on two customers instead of one, three customers instead of two. So
Mhm.
that will lift things to some degree or go the negative if we were to lose a client. But as far as the peaks and valleys and the month over month and year over year percentages, because we've got the system down, it just tracks, it just follows. So that allows me to step back and not worry about the numbers as much because the numbers are just doing their thing over in the corner. And without my influence, they're just doing it. We just focus on the clients and we focus on the projects and doing good work. And through that, I think the experience and the focus on the client has given the client a feeling of experience. I think they love working with our team. I think they feel like they're important and that they matter to us. And a byproduct of that is now clients that have been with us for years. So because we're not necessarily losing clients year over year,
Mhm.
the foundation of what we're building on just gets more solid every year that goes by because we're not losing clients. And then secondly, the longer we're with these clients, the more they sing our praises.
Yeah.
So we have one client that's been with us 5 years, and she probably sends us, call it 5 to 10 really solid leads every year. So if you just, again, take a step back, cut it in half and just say conservatively, we're going to get 5 new clients from just this client every year. So 5 years from now, we'll have 25 new clients
The consistency.
just because we took care of the one.
And you're
So
investing and pouring into that. But you also mentioned earlier that you did a backwards approach as opposed to saying, hey, I want to get to X amount of revenue. I want to hit 10 million this year, et cetera, et cetera. Here's the numbers I have to hit. Here are the, and it's logical to hit that approach. But you mentioned the backwards. Can you elaborate on the backwards approach?
yeah, just basically like wherever we're at today. So it's going to get a little geeky for you, but I have a massive spreadsheet where I track everything. I track my month over month numbers. I track my contracting fees, any subscription fees. Like I just track the numbers so that every month I can see where we're at. And through doing that year over year, I've got a really good sense of not only the peaks and the valleys, but when we're going to see influx in maybe new customers. You know, summer's going to
Mhm.
slow down because everybody's hitting the lake, that kind of stuff. So all I really have to do is kind of look back at to wherever I'm at today. I just look back at January through September. I figure out my average per month and I go, okay, January, February, March, April, May, looks like we're averaging X amount per month. That would be, call it 30, 40% over last year. So now if I take October through December, do the same thing year over year, we always see a little boost in this in that fourth quarter. So that will
Yep.
be 45 to 50%. Now, if I take my 30% plus my 50%, I can basically map out within reason exactly where we're going to end up by the end of the year without driving through sales, without knocking on doors or giving or trying to sell something that people don't need. And to your point earlier, God bless the other agencies and God bless those who do it that way. It's just not how I do it.
No, and that's why we're talking because I love this approach. We resonate so well, like together on this mindset approach. And I love the fact that you look at over a long time horizon because I think that is important. I had a conversation actually a long time ago with a former mentor, and he's like, "Yeah, he mentioned to me, I just track, make sure that we hit a certain monthly revenue." I'm like, "Oh, my goal is based on like an annual revenue, and I know if these activities will produce compounding effects." And I'm like, "It's just a different paradigm. I thought I was doing it wrong, but that was back in the day." I'm curious to know, so for on your end, it's the principles and the foundation of the habits that you're focusing on that produce these outcomes that give you the stability. Do you mind sharing some of the foundational principles that you follow every day? For example, like if I want health, I know I have to do certain things like drink coffee 90 minutes after I wake up, not drink water X amount before I sleep, get some sunlight in me, get some vitamin D on my skin every day. There's all these things that you can do to microdose to increase your health. Same thing for the business. I'd love to know on your end, what are some of the key habits that you focus to continue to have the sustainability?
Yeah. Before I answer that, let me throw one more thing at you
Yeah.
that when it comes to like even the tracking of the numbers, I spent the first probably 3, 4 years of my business having everybody tell me I was doing it wrong. Because
Really?
everybody's trying to teach me the principles of profit and loss. Here's how you
Mm.
figure it out. And you minus this, subtract this is your number, this is your margin. And I'm like, but that's not how it works for me. There's a 60 to 90-day lead time. I'm making my connections. I'm cultivating the relationship. My contractors are doing this and I'm doing this. And the timing of all the logical stuff that would feed into a really black and white scenario of profit and loss, none of it applied to me. And I spent the first few years of my business fighting that with
Really?
my accountants and my advisors and whoever until finally I was just done with it. If I'm doing it wrong, then why am I growing? And I'm not saying this is the only way to do it. There's obviously other ways to do it,
Yeah, yeah.
but this is how it works for me. And I just need to find more people that appreciate this approach. That's how it basically boils down to for me. And when I kind of shed that skin and kind of freed myself of that burden of having to do it somebody else's way, that's when things essentially took off to some degree.
I wanna highlight that because this goes against the grain of everything that we've talked about and with the mindset that we share is just because there is a right way doesn't mean it's the only way. But even beyond that, the fact that your approach, and I think I alluded to this in the beginning, our approach is a legacy long-term thing. Like, we're not thinking in personally, I'm not thinking in 3 years timeframes. I'm thinking, what can I do for the next 5 to 10 years, and what does that actually look like? Some years will look like, how is this an investment? It's gonna pay off, right? You have those ups and downs, and it doesn't make logical sense, but I think it's important. I've probably from our conversations, like, we're aligned with it's a longer term thing, and if we had those other short term examples, like, I have friends that wanna exit and they pump and they grow and they help that company, they wanna exit, cool, that's awesome. More power to you. It's a different approach, and I feel like that's what we're trying to get at. This is looking at it from a long-term lens.
Well, and there's a huge part of I can appreciate logic and math and best practices. I can appreciate those things, but a lot of what I'm doing when you're trying to disrupt the industry and cultivate something different, you
Mhm.
have to have a certain amount of belief. And yeah, you want to quantify that this is what I believe in and it's working or not working. And you want to make sure you're on the right track and stay on that track, but you got to believe too.
What are the core
And
beliefs that are driving you, though? There's some principles, but what are those core beliefs that are driving you to do what you do, put your flag in the ground?
I'll answer that question and merge it with your previous question in that I just want to have fun in what I'm doing. I don't necessarily believe there's a right or a wrong way to do anything. I think that clients want to be appreciated and clients want to be heard and I think clients, especially in the marketing industry, because agencies typically do it a certain way, I think there's always been a combative relationship with clients because they don't want to feel taken advantage of. And are you
Mm,
trying to sell me something I don't need?
it's huge.
There's just a natural rub there that I think is in the industry. And for me, it's I don't want to deal with that. I don't want to be that way. I don't want them treating me that way. And I don't want to deal with that rub or that rough relationship that I had no part in creating. So
Mhm.
instead, I just come at it with and I'm using my clients' words, but I come at it with Midwest nice. I'm very friendly. I'm very friendly with
Yeah.
my clients. I care. This sounds silly, but I think you have to care. You can't do a really good job at anything if you don't care. You are
Mhm.
leaving opportunity on the table. If good is good enough for you, you just shortchange somebody and probably yourself, certainly the client. So you have to care. And we make it a focus of ours to make sure all the T's are crossed, the I's are dotted, T's are crossed. We're trying to answer the questions before the clients ask them. We're trying to steer them towards success. It's not about the next payday. It's not about the next project. I've said this, and this is just a 30,000-foot view comment is that if my goal was to get $100,000 from a client or $10,000 or whatever, I don't need it all the first week. I'll get
Yeah,
it over the course of time.
exactly.
So as long as I'm doing the right thing and helping them succeed, I don't have to worry about where the money's coming from or how it's going to pay for itself because it's naturally going to just bring us there. And then it gives that client time to digest the process so when it comes time for okay, now we have to spend 20 grand or whatever that number is, they're not feeling sold and they're not feeling like
It's
I
not even a
just
consideration at this point. It's more, should we work with Mike? I've seen this again on the flip side, being working with teams or even with partners on big projects. And it's like, you did really well here. Of course, I'm going to give you more work. Of course, you're going to get more value. And the moment that we feel slighted or not taken care of or appreciated, that you feel it. You feel it.
and they naturally they just accept it because they knew it was coming. This is the road we've been on. This is the road you've been telling me we're on. I believe you. I trust you. If that's the logical step, then we take it. And I don't have to feel because I don't like to sell. I don't if the client isn't on board, I'm not going to sell them on.
Well, you love selling. Trust me, you love selling because of the fact that you love serving. Selling is service. Pushing people over the edge for what they don't want, maldiagnosis. No one loves that.
True.
I
True.
gotta change that, man. Sales is happening all the time in a wonderful way, but not an approach where you're just like, "Hey, just lean over, sign on the line, let's go."
And maybe I mean that in the traditional way because I feel like, I don't know, so many client stories, they start with the last guy told me this, or the last company sold me this. And I wasn't there. Maybe it's not the agency's fault. I have no idea. But I just don't want that to be my narrative. So that's how my approach is different. And I really try to
Mhm.
work with them on let's start with the stuff that hurts. Let's fix that first and we'll go from there. And wherever the road takes us, then so be it.
And this does hit on both points that this is where you plant your flag in the ground, and it sounds like your daily investments are going to be in the relationship building. And this obviously, I can, because I've been on both ends of both the client and the sales experience. I've been on both ends of the fast and the slow growth. The counter arguments of this kind of mindset, and I just want to call it out just so we understand different perspectives. Is like, oh, this feels like it's the long term game. This feels like it's a little slow. It feels like I can't have speed velocity to sale. It sounds, and that may or may not be true. I'm not here to make a judgment call on this particular case, but I feel like it's important to understand that that's the game we chose to play. It's the approach that we chose. Like the end goal in your perspective is to be the disruptor in the industry, is to be the different one, not just another one.
Correct.
So I think when you play that game, you have to do these kinds of things, in my opinion.
And I think for the clients, it's disrupting, and to some degree, they're not expecting it. I get it in different forms, and I'm not saying it to boost the ego of Cyberdogz, but we get it
Yeah.
a lot where they question us, like,
Are you for
why,
real?
why, hey, are you for real? Why do you do it this way? This is, and they ask us those questions. And of course,
Yeah.
sometimes we laugh and we're like, this is why, but we take that as a compliment because, like I said, there's 50 ways to skin a cat. We just have our own way.
Not again, not to boost the ego, but I will boost the ego. Like I'm gonna name a couple brands here and I want to dive into this. Adidas, Burton, Nike, Under Armour, Oakley, Jordan. Like these are companies that you've worked with, right? It works. There's an approach of why they're coming to you. And I kind of want to dive into that too, because there's different modalities of playing the game. Like we talked about the different lanes that you can be in, but then there's also, do you want to play small? Do you want to play big? And sometimes we fear playing big because, oh, I'm not good enough, or they must know something that I don't know. Can we shatter that mindset right now and get your perspective on that?
Yeah. And just to clarify, a lot of those bigger brands, the Nike, the Jordan, the Under Armour, I worked with those in my previous career. And to shatter the myth, like you were saying, what I learned during that process was I just learned how normal they all are. I myself, I love those kinds of brands. I'm a huge sneakerhead. So Jordan was when I first met and was working with the Jordan brand or even Nike, like I was really awestruck with just the experience of, oh my God, it's Nike. And as part of that, I just assumed that it's Nike. They're going to have all the answers. They're going to know everything. Everything they drop on the table is going to be marketing gold. Like I just had this belief of this, I don't know, this unrealistic experience was about to happen. But instead, they walk in the room with their little notepads and their pens and sticky notes, and they ask questions. And like, I just realized that they're just regular people and they weren't any smarter than anybody else. They just
Hmm.
worked for a really cool company. The more I worked with those brands and the more I got to contribute and the more I got to participate in my perception of their brand and, oh man, we could do that, started to build my confidence and having a broad understanding of what it takes to manage a big brand versus a small brand.
Hmm.
But also it just debunked this idea that they're unobtainable. So when I started Cyberdogz, that was my goal and it still is. And I don't really know why, other than it's like a BHAG for me, a big, hairy, audacious goal. I just want to get back to Nike. I want Nike to be a client of Cyberdogz someday. And I don't really know why, other than it would prove to me that we could get there again. I worked with them in my previous life when I was in corporate world, and that was awesome. But now I want to prove that anybody can get there because they're not that scary. And I think a lot of agencies, a lot of freelancers, a lot of people who are doing these types of jobs, they just don't see that as an option or they don't strive for something that big. And for me, I've already peeked behind the curtain. I know what's back there.
Hmm.
I just gotta get on the agenda. That's it. Like I know I can do that job or have those conversations with those kinds of companies because I've done it many times. I just got to get back there, you
How
know, and
would you
right
do it? I
now,
mean, that's a ambitious goal, and I love breaking that, let's call it a glass ceiling, because I have client, like small client. They're not small, but they're really well known in their industry, and but they want to hit the bigger fish in the pond. And compared to them, we're tiny. We're like very small compared to the big guys and the big gals. But with that though, there is always, it seems, oh, they're unapproachable, or I can't actually get in front of them, or how do I get on the agenda? I I, I can assume that your approach is going to be relationship first, but like what would you propose? Because they're listening to this podcast. What would you propose to take the first steps there?
two things. One is that if you don't get in the game, you have no idea. The only
Yeah.
way to catch fish is to throw a line in the water, and that's how you do it.
Yeah. Happens.
The other thing is, yeah, you have to be authentic and you have to build a reputation for yourself.
Yep.
That's why it's always been so important for me with Cyberdogz is, and I say this, my clients are, if they're listening, they're rolling their eyes because I say it all the time. I want to hit home runs. That's all I want to do. I want to hit home runs. I want to get on people's radar. Like I'll take the average stuff too, But if we're not doing an A+ job, we need to regroup and we need to figure out how to do it,
Mhm.
because home runs is how we get Nike to call us and say, we heard you guys are doing some pretty cool things. We'd like to work with you. That's the only way that happens. If we're on the B honor roll or we're barely passing with our C
Dang.
pluses,
Yeah.
that's not how we're going to get that stuff. And you just have to be bold. We have a lot of clients that have come to us, and I love all my clients, don't get me wrong, but we have clients that I would consider the more run of the mill average clients that I'm proud to have them, but they're not on that path of Nike, but I'll take
Yeah,
them.
yeah,
I'm going
yeah.
to take care of them. But then we have some that we've done some work with Milwaukee Tool. We just did a motorcycle bike build collaboration with Milwaukee Tool and Janus Motorcycles. We didn't get the project, but we did some proposal work for Jenny McCarthy's booze line called Blondies. We did some work for Cremota Coffee, it's basically owned by Zane and Heath, who are YouTube celebrities, if you know who they are. Like, we have found ourselves in some very unique scenarios with some big brands that I would consider on that path to Nike. And people always ask, like, how did you do that? How did you make that happen? We reached out, we contacted them, we engaged with their social media. I private message people. Like,
It takes building that moat around and then sharing the work, getting the wins, and building that relationship.
it's throwing lines in the water. Not to keep throwing analogies, but that's the only
You
way you
gotta
catch
do
fish
it.
is throwing lines in the water. And I'm not afraid to be told no. Like, Nike's probably going, oh, it's him again. But sooner or later, they're going to go, oh, it's him again. Let's
It's him
call him.
again.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's gonna happen. Like you mentioned earlier, the law of averages, the law of persistence, it's gonna happen, man. It's gonna happen.
Well, and we just have to do our part. And that's the big thing. If we stay true to who we are and we take care of our clients and we're authentic and we're creative and we're hitting home runs, it gets harder and harder for those big brands to go, why not give them a chance?
100%. To switch gears here, let's dive into just wanting to close out and learn. Because you've worked on obviously very exciting, cool, different types of project. What's the one that you're most proud of to this day and why?
I would say probably we built a website for Dan Jurgens,
Mhm.
who he's a DC comic book artist. He actually wrote and illustrated the death of Superman back in the 90s. So that was like a huge thing, which actually then fed into the Zack Snyder Justice League movie. In the comic book industry, Dan Jurgens he's a big deal.
Mhm.
He's a celebrity essentially. And it's not the craziest story, but as an entrepreneur, anybody who owns a business, you have days where you're just wondering, what am I doing? Like, why am I doing this?
Yeah, it's crazy.
I should have just stayed where I was, that kind of a thing. And I've always taken it upon myself on those days where if I have days like that, I will not just ruminate in that funk. I will find a way out of it. And
Mhm.
how I generally find a way out of it is I'll just do something for somebody else. I donate my time. I figure out a way to basically take the attention off myself so I get out of that woe is
It's a
mindset.
really healthy approach to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was having one of those days and I started thinking about just how I got here and whatnot. And I actually keep a comic book cover posted by my desk of Booster Gold #7 that was written and illustrated by Dan Jurgens.
Uh-huh.
And long story short, it was one of the last things, that comic book was one of the last things I bought with $1 that my grandpa gave me before he died.
Oh,
Yeah. So I kind of thought, I wonder what Dan Jurgens is up to these days. So I hopped on the internet and started watching Dan Jurgens and found out he was from Minnesota, which I was like, oh, that's crazy. I didn't realize that.
yeah.
And then I found his website, and no offense, Dan, but his website needed a lot of work. And I saw his contact Dan type email at the bottom. And I just thought, man, I should just build a website for Dan Jurgens. That'd be cool. So I just messaged him. I messaged Dan Jurgens and I said, here's the story how I used to rake leaves for my grandpa. He paid me $1. And one of the last comic books I ever bought before he died was Booster Gold #7. You're not going to believe this, but I want to build you a website for free, no strings attached. Just give me a call. And I just threw myself at Dan Jurgens, just saying, I just want to do something cool for you. That's it. And it took about 2 weeks and he called me back, or he emailed me back, I should say. And I think he was a little standoffish to a degree. He's like, what's this about? He was asking a lot of questions.
Oh, yeah. You gotta make sure
And
it's real, right?
Yep, and I had to reinforce just I don't really have a grand strategic plan as to why I wanna do this. I just wanna do this for you, and I appreciate the work, and you this whole experience kinda reminds me of my grandpa, and gave him that story, and lo and behold, about 3 months later, we built him a new website and launched it, and it's one of my favorite projects we've ever done. I think it's helped Dan out a lot, and for me, what do you get out of something like that? For me, I got the experience. I got to
Mm.
fill my cup. I got to if 9-year-old, 10-year-old Mike, if I could have told myself, "Hey, at about 30 years from now, you're gonna get to build a" that was pretty cool, and then it just makes for a good story, and to do something like that to just help somebody out, it's the best project we've ever done.
I love that. It's I think this is why you do the work you do. This is why you do the work you do. You put the passion behind it. You put the human behind it. It's not just let me just do this and because I want a relationship or want a referral. It touches home. Like I have similar emotions based on like my family members who felt me and the generations in the past. So that's why I believe it resonates so well. That's why I believe that you do good work. So thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah, and it's gotta be fun. That's the thing is, like, the fun projects, like the Dan Jurgens site, that bought us 6 months worth of regular projects. Like, we were riding
Yeah.
high on Dan Jurgens for so long that you gotta have some fun projects in there, and
It's
that's
the
why
intangibles. Those are the intangible. One thing that I
Yep,
think we forget is that we have to implement joy or delight in our day, not for the sake of selfishness, but for the sake of the journey. And one thing too that I tell business owners or entrepreneurs, CEOs, is that you have to provide the electrolytes for your team because they're running a marathon that doesn't end,
yeah.
especially for labor intensive businesses like yours. The marathon doesn't end. You got to provide the electrolytes, the sweets, the waters, and keep them going.
I think you gotta make believers out of people too, because
Yeah.
I can't even tell you how many times that we've tried to help people or help businesses where they were so put off by the fact that there's gotta be a catch. There's no catch, I just wanna help you. And
Mhm.
they've actually rejected the help because the mindset or how this typically works is there's always a catch, right? And
Yeah.
for me, that's sad. So we gotta change that.
It's just a huge stepping stone forward.
So anytime we can and don't get me wrong, we have our paid projects and we need those paid projects because
We established that, right? Oxygen
that's how we
and
keep
blood.
that's how we keep the lights on. But there are times where, yeah, if I'm
Give
coming to you
back.
offering you my hand, I can promise you there's no strings attached. And we've had plenty of those opportunities to do some cool things and to help some people out. But it's the ones who've rejected us that kind of keep that going because it's I just want to change that. I just don't think that's I think that's sad. I think that the fact that we're that closed off or that scared of scared of some kind of scheme that they're going to reject help that's a problem.
Yeah,
So
it's a personal
we don't want to
trust
be known for
issue.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, 100%. No, Mike, it's a pleasure having you on the show. For our listeners out there, what's the best place for people to, one, thank you for being on, and two, learn more about what you're up to in Cyberdogz?
Yeah, they can check out our website at cyberdogsmarketing.com and then social media is probably the best way to engage. We're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, soon to be TikTok. Like we got a wave of stuff coming your way very soon.
Oh, okay, you're gonna be on the TikToks too. Cool. We'll put the links on the show notes. Mike, it's always a pleasure, man. Thank you.
Thank you.
If you found value in today's podcast, please consider sharing this with someone that you believe could also benefit from this episode. You never know, you may be the catalyst that opens them up to a new way of operating their business and experiencing life. As always, it's an honor to be a small part of your journey. This is Raul Hernandez. Do good work.